Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Blue Prism Generation Digital Workforce podcast with Shibumi. Today, as my guest, I have Ken Pellegrino. He is a co-founder, board member, and the chief strategy officer of Shibumi. He cultivates and manages the strategic relationships with advisory partners and other technology partners, helping to align Shibumi's capabilities to those partners' capabilities to deliver solutions to the market. Prior to co-founding Shibumi in 2011, Ken spent 20 years in the software industry, working up from consulting to sales leader to executive within the business process analytics and management markets at both Proforma Corporation, Metastorm, and ultimately OpenText, where Ken managed the strategic advisory and technology relationships for the OpenText BPS business unit. Ken, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. That was a little bit of a mouthful of a bio on my perspective, but thanks for having me.
Well, you earned it. There's a lot to cover. And again, that's the reason we're so happy to have you here today, because you're giving a broad view and a long view of about process management, process automation, and process mapping, which is a term I like to use. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But before I go too far off in any other direction, can you give me some quick background on Shibumi? And please include the story of where the name came from.
Yeah, sure. It's always a funny story. Sometimes we get that question quite a bit. So Shibumi was founded in 2012 by myself and a couple other co-founders that had worked together at those previous companies that you mentioned on the intro. Background was really all about, for us, looking at a better way for organizations to get more out of their strategic programs. So what does that really mean, right? It really means taking more of a holistic look of identifying what is an organization attempting to achieve by embarking on either a digital transformation or a large automation type of program, and then backing into what are the key elements or actions or tasks that a program needs to execute upon, and then ultimately aligning really what's the value that the organization would like to achieve, and then are we on track to deliver those outcomes? So when we started Shibumi in 2012, we set out to help an organization do a much better job of managing its strategic portfolio of initiatives. So when we talk about a strategic portfolio of initiatives, it's really large digital transformation programs, large cost takeout programs, large automation programs, right? And the background of what we've always worked on was always an idea that there's a process program in place, meaning a way to get better at an organization from both either cutting cost, improving performance, and any number of of opportunities to get an organization to just run more effectively. And when we started looking at the business space, before we even started Shibumi, we started thinking, well, we've always spent a lot of time optimizing processes. That was what my background was. That's what the company's founders' all background was in the process modeling and automation space. But really what we always noticed is when it was time for us to communicate the value, to track the value of how the program was doing, most of the time we ended up translating content or value prop into Excel and PowerPoint. So it really became, instead of an automated or digital format, we ended up with kind of a very manual step of processes to say, here's our objective, and then here's how we're doing against those objectives. And so in 2012, we started thinking about how, with the advent of the cloud and the advent of programs where they're being very well served from a project management perspective, could we create something that manages that layer that's really all about the value management lifecycle, managing everything from I have an objective, I have an idea, and ultimately I'm going to deliver and realize the impact that my idea had on the bottom line or on the business itself. So that's what we set out to do in 2012. And it's always funny, Shibumi itself translates into the term effortless perfection. And what's funny is it really came from myself, my partner Bob, my other partner Mark, sitting around actually my coffee table in San Francisco and basically talking about ideas for what our company could do and what it would all be about. And actually, I'll give credit to our CEO, Bob, who said, how about the name Shibumi? And honestly, at the time, I'd never heard of the name at all. And he had mentioned it was a book that he read, and I should take a read on it and then let me know what he thinks. So I downloaded the book. It's a great book, but it's actually a spy novel. It has little to nothing to do with operational improvement and organizational effectiveness. It's all about achieving this Zen-like state, if you will, of effortless perfection, of executing almost like executing in the zone. And so as I read the book, it started to make sense. And as I did some searches on it, there became a lot of business information about it around Shibumi strategy, which has a lot of background around lean and continuous improvement. And then honestly, quite frankly, I couldn't get the name out of my head for a week. So when we met back together and talked about names, I said, let's go with Shibumi, thinking I would always be able to change the name before we launched it. And I just couldn't get the name out of my head. So here we are 8 years later with Shibumi as the brand.
Well, actually, it's a great name because effortless perfection indicates that you're talking about doing something, the process itself, which is really, I think, the whole purpose of Shibumi, as you said, it's the journey. And so maybe if you can help me a little bit more of a deeper discussion on how you enable that journey, that automation journey.
Sure. So what I always find funny is and there's always kinds of discussions and principles about it, but if you really think about it, it is an outcome first. It's an outside in. It is taking a step back and saying, what are we actually trying to achieve as an organization when we're going to embark on a certain program? What are the objectives we're going to try to obtain, whether it's eliminate a set of costs, whether it's improve efficiency, whether it's both from that perspective, whether it's increase revenue. It's all about getting better. So it's literally all about defining the outcomes. And then as you work backwards, as I was just talking about even earlier, as you work backwards, you walk somebody through that life cycle of, once I've understood what I need to achieve, I then have to go set off and identify all the different things I could do, the potential opportunities to improve that or to achieve that outcome. And so when you think about a value life cycle, it's really all about define objectives, gather the candidates, the opportunities that you have to achieve that outcome, and then put them through a process, a standardized process where you can score them, rank them, prioritize them, both on either quantitative or qualitative measures, right? What's the value it's going to have? How well does it align to our strategic input? How much is it going to cost to deliver on that program? And allow you to assess each of those opportunities against those different parameters to identify the candidates that you want to basically greenlight or approve, put funding behind. And then as you put the funding behind those, what really becomes important is tracking the delivery of that program all the way through, but not from a timeline, not from a time and percent complete. Of course you're going to track that, but really about, are we on track to deliver on the value that we set out for? Are we on track to have the impact when we greenlighted this program to achieve the outcome that we set out for?
Well, that's an interesting insight because it's really hard to define meaningful KPIs, especially in outcome planning. So it really is nice how you described how you deconstruct the outcome back to the point of action. And you're able to capture those KPIs when you're defining the tasks that are part of your project that you're going to track. So I always thought that was kind of an amazing value proposition for Shibumi. When you talk about delivering value, how does Shibumi work developing value at scale? I mean, when you talk about outcome planning for both customers and technical partners in their journey, how do you help them plan for success beyond a project?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of it depends. There's different places along the journey where having kind of everything as a single source of truth, having a real value kind of management focused effort really helps drive the next phase of your customer journey. So if you really think about it in the very beginning, as an organization embarks on automation from a program's perspective, as an example, they've set out to get an objective to hit maybe some savings target they want to achieve. But when they're really getting started and they're really getting their foot wet, maybe they've just gotten started with Blue Prism and they've started automating some processes. Oftentimes people go at it with the approach of, I'm going to automate the things that are within my span of control, easy to control. I really just want to understand how the technology would work and support and get comfortable with automating things. That's fine as a starting point, but when it starts to become time to say, hey, this program actually operates or works effectively, and now I need to go get that additional funding to really help start to drive the growth or adoption of the program, you need to be able to communicate back what the value of those programs are. And if you haven't started right up front of systematically tracking or at least identifying how the impact is going to be achieved, how the outcome is going to get achieved through your automation program, by the time it's time to go back and and put your business case together to go get additional funding, you really have a hard time validating the impact that the program was having. Sure, you automated some things that's interesting, but what impact does that have on returning back to the business? How does that help the organization get better, get more efficient, execute more effectively? It's really hard to go back and try to clean that up if you haven't started down that path or at least thought about that path before you get too far down the road. But in the very beginning, we do a really nice job of helping drive an organization to get themselves organized and help them make their business case to really fund or expand the program, meaning go off the different business units, expand that. And one of the mechanisms through that is by centralizing that process, what we also are doing is creating a backlog, creating a systematic backlog that isn't about look how many ideas we have, but look how much potential impact is sitting in our backlog available for us to be able to act upon. And so you can really create a nice visual or basically presentation to management that says, we've started this journey, here's what we've delivered to date, here's how much we're acting upon, and what's just as important is here's all the opportunities we've identified just with the scope we have that we haven't been able to act upon. And as we continue to grow and expand, we can start to execute on that list more and more to get more and more of that value back that returns to the business. And that part gets really exciting and helps drive that next level of maturity. And then when you think of large programs, right, when you think of these large corporate programs that have been in existence for a while and may have hundreds, if not thousands of processes that they've automated, that complexity gets really hairy and really complex. And what you tend to see is COEs, whether they're decentralized or centralized in that manner, tend to spend more and more of their time is allocated towards just managing the aspects of the program. And I always find that funny, right? Where an automation program, where the objective is to help streamline the processes and make them more efficient and allow for automation or digital solutions to help drive a business process. And then a COE itself ends up managing all of the activities it's doing through PowerPoints and spreadsheets and all of the sort of manual Microsoft tasks that you're attempting to sort of streamline in a process. And we tend to be a really nice avenue for them to add productivity to their COE without adding a lot of complexity.
Well, I think the way that you help add the productivity is you're enabling your customers to have a more systematic approach to how they understand and triage the different opportunities for automation. So they can start looking at those processes that you've mentioned in the backlog and really, like in an apples-to-apples comparison, see the level of effort to help create the automations, to help transform the business. So, I mean, how do you render that to the customer? How do you expose that type of reporting or insights to a customer?
It's one of the big tricks, right? Is it's nice to gather a lot of that content, but obviously if you can't organize it and present it back to a team to allow them to make an effective decision, all you're doing is data gathering. That's an Excel spreadsheet, right? In that scenario. So what I think we do a really nice job of being able to, when you have these apples to apples comparisons, you allow an organization to effectively generate almost their own scoring system, right? Of course, as Shibumi, the application has its own effective kind of ability to score, but you also have the ability to tweak, weight that, and generate scores. Basically, think of an X and Y coordinates on a chart, and allow you to then position and say, hey, I'd like to compare the complexity of this set of candidate processes with the value that it has, and be able to present that on a timeline to say, if I wanted to see the total amount of opportunities I could implement in the next 12 months with this amount of budget, and I want to deal with the ones that have the maximum value that could be assigned to it, you can pull that data and present it back to a team to allow them to make the most effective decision of, should I automate A or should I automate B?
So, I really like the long tail view that Shibumi provides. If you're an organization, and as you mentioned before, complexity, you have a larger breadth of projects, you're giving this portfolio of processes a home. You're helping the customer, as I said, learn how to reapply it, learn how to address the backlog, learn how to prioritize. I think there's kind of a curveball I wanted to ask you about. How does your product help with COVID-19 response? Because now you're having a lineage of your customers using your product over a period of time, but now the rules are changing and they need to adapt and consider new variables. How does Shibumi engage and help with that challenge?
Well, the interesting part, and it's a great question, obviously very timely. We've seen a couple things sort of occur. Business is not going to operate in the way that it has before. And I find it to be really interesting in the conversations we have, because you watch the organizations that are new to our conversations, meaning when we're talking to them for the first time, or even talking to our partners for the first time, and they've all been getting accustomed to teams being distributed and no longer in the office, and managing status meetings through Zoom calls all over the place. And not being able to effectively operate in the way that they were before, when they would have a status meeting or approval meeting, or be able to walk down the hall and have a discussion about whatever the opportunity is that they wanted to talk to somebody about. That whole dynamic has changed. And I think the idea, what has ended up being kind of one of the interesting sidebars to, or side products of the whole pandemic, is the fact that organizations have push themselves now to be much more effective around digital and around accelerating their journey. That was occurring anyways in the market. Everybody could see it. Everybody was talking about it. But it really kind of forced an organization to take a hard look at itself and say, can we operate our processes where we don't have to all be sitting in the same room? Our status meeting doesn't have to be that hour-long meeting where everybody gets 5 minutes to talk and stand in front of the room. But it can really be something where we can put in a system in place where people from all over the world can communicate about ideas, about ranking ideas, about status, about progress, issue raising. All of that can be done in a central place that's available to anybody anywhere in the world, and really kind of change the way an organization executes not only an automation program, just all types of big capital programs where they're doing as part of a big digital transformation journey.
Well, actually, that actually is what sets you apart, I think, is it's not just that long view, it's not just the high view, it's the fact that it's a nexus. It's a place, as you said, it's a singularity. Because any projects that you have insights to, that information by definition is captured, it's reusable. It can help elevate the level of collaboration and process development across organizations that share it. I mean, it's very, very impressive what you can do within the Shibumi product. But I think what I'd like to kind of start closing out with is, tell me a little bit about your partner ecosystem strategy. Obviously, I'm biased to learn more about why you partner so closely with Blue Prism, but what is the larger strategy of go-to-market for Shibumi with their partners?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really foundational to the company. When we started out, as I mentioned in 2012, talking about executing strategic programs and helping organizations be more effective with executing on these programs, we didn't set out as Shibumi to be the advisory partner, if you will, to those firms. When they're talking about multi-billion-dollar supply chain optimization or large efforts where they're going to cut an exhaustive amount of cost from a business, they need to engage with very strategic partners like the the advisory firms, Accenture, Deloitte's, KPMG's, EY's, PwC's of the world. Those guys are out there every day executing on these programs and being great business partners for the customers. And as we started the firm, we realized quite early on that the way that we're going to be successful is to allow a advisory firm to embed its method and approach into a product like ours so that they could provide their uniqueness, their ability to help an organization stand up or advance their own maturity around a transformation program and take a customer on a journey, but use our software as the backbone to drive that. And that allows for a couple different scenarios, which is it allows for our partners, to create a better experience for their customers. And then the customers to be able to adopt that method and approach. So as the advisory team rolls off and the customer's there, instead of looking at a bunch of books and trying to figure out how it was being managed so effectively by their advisory partner, they have a piece of technology that has the process, the governance, the checkpoints embedded into it, so that it's almost creating that concept of like muscle memory for the customer. They can just execute on the process that their advisors help set up, and it really helps carry them along and really gives them a better chance of continuing success once the advisory team rolls off. And that sort of process led us, and I think has served us well in a lot of different places. That's been our go-to-market channel for a long period of time. It's been working with advisory firms where they help set up a program, and then we help embed that within an organization to kind of create the repeatability, meaning the sustainability within an organization. And what that becomes as part of an ecosystem is it becomes where you actually turn that process of value management into something that's part of the corporate fabric, the corporate both method and approach, meaning the methodology that an organization uses, but also the technology underneath. So we spend a lot of time in the platform of creating the integrations to say, not only is this a good process that we want to follow through and want to identify opportunities and develop a business case and track the delivery, but when you do delivery, you need to understand whether the program that I stood up is going to have the impact of the business case that I wanted. That is the supernatural place where Blue Prism comes in. Blue Prism is the mechanism to deliver and automate on that process. And it's gathering the performance numbers of how that process is executing. So it was very natural for us to be able to reach down and say, we need the Blue Prism information about how the processes are executing so that we can pull that back and compare that directly against those business cases that were created to really show an organization, you were approving projects that you expected to have impact of X, and we're now delivering, and you can see that delivered through Blue Prism and Y. And that became a really effective end-to-end story that I think helps our customers tenfold. And it does it in a manner that's very, very natural for them. They're already using Blue Prism to automate. They're already trying to approve items through business cases. We're really just putting a big face to it. And as you mentioned, being a nexus, an end-to-end vision around how you can track value from ideation all the way through to delivery.
If I can just add to what you said, and I think, I appreciate having this conversation with you prior to this podcast, is what I really appreciate about the partnership between Shibumi and Blue Prism is I knew that you plugged in well to our platform because you understood robotic operating model. You understood the purpose of our automation. You understood what digital workers were capable of. You were able to model processes which would help people design better digital workflows. So the synergy between us, as you said earlier, it just made all the sense that this strategic partnership would only grow and flourish. So I think that this is just another example of having this podcast of how our companies are benefiting, not just each other, but our customers by working together. And I just see a very strong relationship getting better, and the value proposition that we offer only getting more apparent and useful over time. So I really do appreciate your time today and in your partnership, and I look forward to our next conversation. So thank you very much, Ken.
I appreciate it too, Eric. This was a lot of fun. was my first podcast, so this was very. I enjoyed it tremendously. So thank you.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.